Good evening, everybody. Good to see a few keen people on asparagus and wanting to get involved in the crop. I've always felt that asparagus is a good crop for Wales because it's quite a low yielding crop, and it's so much better for being local and fresh and seasonal. So you've got the three good drivers there. I'm sure there'll be a good market for Welsh asparagus, and I think we've got quite a far-flung interested parties on tonight, so hopefully we'll see a bit going in the ground. I've been working on asparagus now for 30 years at least, I think, and I'm from the Vale of Evesham, so I was sort of born in an asparagus plantation, and it's a fairly simple crop to grow, but it does need basic attention, and we'll go through the agronomy of it now. We've got Adrian on from Bellis Brothers, who's been growing asparagus on that farm for at least 15 years, as far as I know. And then we got Phil up at Mostyn, who's a relatively new producer, but you know, interested in the crop. Right, Ewan, can I have slide 2, please? Right, is asparagus right for you? I mean, one thing about asparagus is it doesn't fit in well with lambing. So we're now busy in South Wales. We'd be busy probably second half of April through till the longest day. So if you're lambing in that time, you could find a problem with it. Or if you've got other enterprises on the farm, it contrasts with. It sort of fits in well with soft fruit. Hang on, my internet's a bit low, so I'll stop the video. Right. Economics, it's quite an interesting crop economically. One thing that defines asparagus is you do need quite a large area of it because it's relatively low yielding. I think it's one of the lowest yielding vegetable crops we grow, and it sort of yields between 2 and 5 tonne a hectare, depending on how well you're doing. That would contrast with carrots, so 80 to 100 tonnes a hectare, so massive difference in the yield. So that's why we've got to major on a high price, really. You can plant it on your own or rented land because it's when you're actually harvesting asparagus, it just looks like a bare field, so there's nothing to get the public excited. So it doesn't work well in farm tourism and pick your own, but we'll come on to that a bit later on. You've got to take great care in site selection. Really, ideally you need a sort of sandy loam type soil, but whatever soil you have got, it's got to be well drained so it won't stand wet feet. It's a perennial crop in the ground for 10+ years. So you've got to pick the site and get it right to start with. Labour demand, I'll come on to that a bit later on, but there's a fair bit of labour. It sometimes needs harvesting daily, and it wants picking and packing same day, and hopefully selling same day to get the best out of the market. Various mechanical operations, very little cultivation once you've actually got it going, but you know, it does need weed control. We have got an organic EIP on asparagus down in Monmouth on 2 farms, and it's in its final year and it's going well, so I'll come on to that a bit later on. But a basic crop, and as it's perennial, doesn't need to be re-established every couple of years or so. Right, next one, please. This is the lead-in time, and preparation and plant in year 1, and you're planting asparagus round about now, maybe a bit earlier than this. We normally plant in April. Year 2, a bit of controversy here. I'd like if the fern did really well in year 1, there was like 3 or 4 ferns per planting station, and they were about 1 metre to 1.5 metres high. And in year 2, I'd go for a pruning cut, which means you just cut for a couple of weeks so that as the fern develops, then it doesn't get full of old fern by the sort of end of July. So with asparagus, you've got basically a crop of fern that grows from the planted crown, and that fern builds up a quantity storage root in the ground, and then that is what drives your crop for the following year. Year 3, if year 2 goes really well and your spawn's getting up towards head height, 1.5 to 2 meters, then happy days, and you can probably go year 3 harvest to 21st of June. If the spawn's a little bit weaker, stop on the 31st of May. So just judge it on how well, it's all judged on how well your fern did the following year, really, because you can't expect to harvest it hard if the fern didn't do well. So it's always a bit of an interesting guy. Year 4 onwards, then you do harvest the 21st of June and stop then. You have to stop then, because if you cut after that, you start weakening the crowns and then they go downhill very, very quickly. So the harvesting 21st of June is the rule. This year, because we've had a really bad April, farms aren't really harvesting anything much yet. But that doesn't mean that you can go on till the end of June to make up the yield. So you just got to be faithful to that 21st of June and never ever go past it. Otherwise, you're going to weaken your plantation, and it's very, very difficult to get back. Okay, next one, please. Yeah, well, these are the opportunities probably in Wales. We mainly would be farm shop. I would think it's, as I stated before, it's not really a pick your own crop. And some farms do it, but it's looks like a bare field. There's zero excitement in the field. It's not like a crop of strawberries or a crop of pumpkins or sunflowers. It's got no eye appeal, so it just looks like a bare field when it's actually cropping. Farmers markets are all right, but asparagus can grow quite a bit in a day, so you really need a really regular outlet. It can be quite good just to put a board up. It's a crop that does stop the traffic, and people do want fresh local asparagus, so they will go out of their way to come and get it. So don't be too worried about sales. Sometimes local hotels and stuff will have it. The key thing about asparagus when you're growing it for these direct markets is to keep the price high. You want to be looking somewhere around about £12 a kilo, and look at doing better than that if you can. £12 a kilo in 4 bunches of 250 grams. It's £3 a bunch, so that's not that expensive, and that's the way to sell it, really small bunches. Present it well, tying it up with jute string, avoid plastic if you can. A nice paper band on the bottom with your farm details and brand on it helps. Supermarkets do sell a fair bit of asparagus, and they make up the sales when we haven't got much with stuff from Peru and elsewhere in the world, but you're not really competing with that. They'll be on probably lower prices than you are. The wholesale market sort of caved into about £3, £4, £5 a kilo, which not really worth doing for that. So keep out of the bigger markets. If you keep asparagus stood up, it'll stay in cold store for 10 days, but it will decline in quality and flavour. So ideally you sell it the day or the day after that, so you actually cut it, and then you've got a really quality product that will actually get a following going. Okay, next one, please. Right, these are the yield figures. Like I say, the yield varies between 2 ton and 5, so I'll put in there the variation on 2 ton and 4 ton yield per hectare. So if you've only got a hectare, you're only going to get 40 kilos a day average, which is not a huge amount in a farm shop. If you've got a good yield, you'll get double that, and if you've got 4 hectares, you could end up with 160 kilos a day, up to 320. So because we cut in 7 weeks and we've got a low yield, that's the sort of daily output that you can hope for, and you can plan on that. Next one, please. I don't know if there's any questions, but don't be afraid to put a box on the chat line, or just open your microphone and ask. But it's easy to weigh in with something if you're not clear about it. When you're picking your site, topography, so you don't want to be too high up, you don't want to be much above 400 feet ideally. I do see asparagus in Scotland, so it does go further north than Wales, but keep it on the lower ground. Ideally, it wants shelter. It doesn't want being blasted by winds, especially the sort of winds that we've had in April. Frost, avoid frost pockets if you can. If you get an air frost, the actual spears that are through will go rubbery and soft and be very, very poor quality. As we always say, clear the site up of perennial weeds before you start. The main bugbear is creeping thistle, which is an absolute nightmare in asparagus because it comes through the same time as the crop. Crops like weeds like cooch aren't too bad because they're above ground when the asparagus is dormant, so you've got a good chance of having a go at it. Third year, looking at 8 weeks. Yeah, you can be. I mean, I've seen, you know, it depends on, I've seen asparagus on good sound land in a favourable season get up to 1.5 metres tall first year. So then you could be easily on full yield, full span of the 7 weeks in year 3. So yeah, quite happy with that. But it just depends on how good you can get that fern motoring up. The idea you're looking up at the fern, not down at it. Rabbits are a major problem, so if you've got bad rabbit problems, you'll have to fence it or whatever. But they just keep grazing it out, and the area they graze grows year in year. And of course, they don't stop grazing after the 21st of June, so it weakens the crop long term. Location: if you want to sell it at the door, you obviously need to be near a road, not down lanes and stuff. If you are down lanes, then look for a local shop or a box scheme or something that will sell it for you. But as before, focus on that 12 quid a kilo minimum. Previous crop, ideally you would be following 3 or 4 years of cereals, so there'd be very little weed in the field, but you know, you can usually get around most obstacles. Not ideal to follow turf, because turf tends to be quite weedy, but on the EIP organic EIP asparagus at Monmouth, we did follow turf on both sides, and we had a few problems with it, but we worked out a system in the end and it did work. So not afraid of a bit of grass, but better off if it's been well cultivated arable crop inland. Right, next one please. Soil considerations. Well, the main thing there is it won't stand wet, so if the field's not well drained, don't consider it. You can increase drainage, but let the drainage settle down before you start planting. We seem to be into some very heavy rainfall in the winter the last few years, and that's not really suited asparagus. And it's like all ground, if you don't cultivate it or improve the structure every year with either organic matter or subsoiling or similar measures, then the ground does get down rock hard. So you often find asparagus more or less trying to get through concrete. And we have had that this year. You know, the ground's been rock hard because of the cold and the fierce east winds and northeast winds we've had this year, and you know, it's amazing how it does come through. Soil type: Evesham, they grow it on clay soil, but ideally you wouldn't go a lower texture than a sandy clay loam, but that, you know, encompasses most of the ground that you'll find in Wales. It does like quite high pH, so keep your pH up. You don't want to be in the 5s, you want to be more towards 7. The depth and the type of topsoil, you've got to be at least 60 centimeters of decent topsoil really, and the subsoil needs to be adequately drained and hopefully decent structure. You can subsoil the crop, but it's a bit controversial because the storage roots are long lasting, so you don't want to go through breaking a lot of root. And if you've got it on a 1.5 meter between the rows, and then you can do quite a lot of damage to the existing storage system and therefore reduce your yield. So if you do subsoil, don't go deep, and don't try and split up all the ground. Stones, well, stones, you know, they're a bit of a problem if it's really stony, but not too bad. It can get round stones pretty much. Next one please. Casual labour. Well, it's not always casual labour, it's often the on-farm labour, but it you know, between 400 and 1,000 hours a hectare. Fair old range that is. But the thing about asparagus is if it's cold, which says later on there, you don't cut any, and if it's hot, you cut it twice a day. So the casual labour requirement is variable. Usually I've seen 2 people manage a hectare cutting and packing, but it'd be interesting to see what Adrian and Phil have to say about that, since they're doing it. And it's about 50-50 on the harvesting, grading and packing. You can get a lot of mechanical aids to harvesting. It's quite handy to have the main problem with harvesting is the carrying out of the crop, so it's handy if you've got some sort of tractor or a buggy that will carry the asparagus. So you just cut it. You can always get 3 rows into one buggy, and you know, it speeds it up because you're not carrying it to and fro. I've seen harvesting rigs made out of old sprayer booms, etc. And you know, I've seen big ones with 35 people galloping behind it going really fast. So the thing about asparagus is it's quite difficult to train people on how to cut it, because essentially whether the asparagus is ready or not depends on how tight the head is. And if you don't know asparagus, if you see it, the head just starting to burst, it then becomes very poor quality. Not always that important in the markets we're dealing with, because we're not dealing with sort of connoisseurs, but definitely with a supermarket, they want a really tight terminal bud on the asparagus. So there is, I think there is on the Mentor website where we did the EIP, I did put some pictures up of you know, the sort of perfect spears for harvest, so it might be interesting to see that. I don't know if we can put a link into that somewhere, but it would be handy. Asparagus EIP Monmouth. Okay, next one. Well, that is an asparagus field, and good preparation essential. So you need to get it well worked and get the nutrition right. It's in RB209. You wouldn't plant this crop without a soil sample, and the weed control is it's either chemical or organic. So if you do organic weed control, you've got to do cultivation. So you know, we can cover that. There is a lot of emus for herbicides in asparagus, so it will cope with most weeds. And as I said, it does have a dormant period of 6 months, so you know, you can get after the weed a bit in that time, apart from maybe creeping thistle. It's not a massive responder to feed. Obviously, with a very, very low yield, the actual crop offtakes are tiny. So, you know, it's not like a field of carrots or a field of Dutch white cabbage, which would take a lot off the field. So when we've done nutrition trials, although we've done them on very, very good ground, so it was a bit influenced, but we very rarely got a response to NP or K. Drainage got to be perfect, so no line in water, and yeah, that's taken as red really with asparagus. Tends to be these days growing on sand, but although that does suit, it can get very, very dry, and it doesn't like being dry for a long time. So you know, if you've got a bit of loam in the soil, that does suit it. Next one, please. Normally these days we plant them from 1-year-old crowns, and inevitably they come from Holland. There doesn't seem to be any sort of massive Brexit problems with the people that planted this year, and it'll all settle down hopefully. We've had a few problems with soft fruit plants, but I've heard 1 or 2 people getting asparagus plants without much hassle. The secret is to get them planted as soon as you get them. So don't, you know, get them and put them in a pile in a barn somewhere, because they're very, very perishable. And ideally you organise it so you plant them the day that the Arctic and the pallets turn up in the yard, and then you've got no worry about it. If you do have to cold store them, put them in a fridge or somewhere shady, and make sure you cover them with a tarpaulin or something so they don't get a chance to dry out. And that is fundamental. So take that as a commandment that you've got to look after the crowns. You get them in the ground as soon as you can. You don't plant out rows and rows of them and then not cover them up. You cover them up as you go, and you get herbicide on them at the end of the day in case you get rained off or something. But this is key to the success of it. So, you know, it's bad to have a bad start. So, you know, just focus on getting those crowns in straight away and try and organise it so they come in a spell when the weather's decent. When we planted the trials in Monmouth, they were about 1 hectare each, two farms, and we just planted them by hand, got a gang of people in, and wheelbarrow full of crowns, putting them in 1 row, and then as the row was finished, they went over with a levelling board, and it just scraped the soil on them, so they were only dry for 15 minutes tops. So that, you know, that's what you want really. Don't have them out there all day in the sun and drying up. There's 2 grades of crowns, Bs and As. Bs are about half the price. They're always reliable because there's a hell of a variation. You get really small to the big ones. A's are more or less all the same size, and the better the ground, the better the bees do. But you know, if you've got the money, go for the A's, and then you're not sort of skimping on the basic establishment, because establishment in any perennial crop is absolutely vital to the success or failure of the plantation long term. So the planting is probably the key critical area. The second critical area is don't let them get buried in weed, because they're totally non-competitive as a first-year crop. We did start doing module plants, and they were successful, but obviously they're really tiny plants, and we put them in end of May, but probably better go in early that. But they are coming back now with worries about contamination of you know, in Holland they obviously grow them in the ground, so there's a worry about problems coming in on them from the soil. Direct drilling, I've never heard of that. I don't know where that comes from, but don't try that. And I wouldn't try growing your own crowns. I don't mind a bit of sort of gardening propagation where you sow a few seeds in modules, but really you'd be looking at buying crowns in, and that would be your starting point. The crop of the crowns are only about 20-25 pence, so you know you're not doing much to save money. Okay, next one, please. Yeah, well, RB209 is the Bible. This is in the vegetable edition, which I think is volume 5 or 6. Funny crops, it does respond to salt, so you can put a ton of salt on per hectare, or a kilo to 10 square meters every year, and that seems to help keep the fusarium rot out of it. And it also gives a higher percentage of larger spears. So AHDB did a load of trials to prove that salt wasn't needed, and then they found that there was actually a statistical response to it. So now we do as recommended as standard. Additional organic matter good with asparagus because it improves everything: soil structure, capacity of holding nutrients, bringing in worms and stuff like that. So you know, don't be afraid to put manure on it. Ideally, nothing fresh and nothing after December. You can put it on the crop as you mow it off in November. Usually mow the fern off in November to get rid of all the trash. And mulches are quite useful if you can get hold of enough wood chip on a very, very small scale. But keeping the organic matter high does improve the soil. No two ways about that. Green waste could be useful on a smaller scale as well. Supermarkets are very uneasy about putting livestock manures on crops, but you know, it's different if you've got a farm shop. The risk must be absolutely minimal. There are 1 or 2 farms now looking at cover crops, so you go and sow another crop in amongst the asparagus in September, October, and that means that you haven't got a bare field over winter, which you don't really want these days, and you can spray that off or ridge it up in the spring, get rid of it, and that does keep the structure going. It also maintains the nitrogen levels in the ground, so it's win-win really. So these things are coming in now, and you know, they're starting to become, you know, it's not good to have bare fields over winter.
What kind of cover crop could you use? Could be some kind of green manure.
Yeah, I've seen mustards used, and especially caliente type mustards, but I've also seen oats. I mean, oats seems to be quite a useful one because it's relatively easy to kill, and it seems to germinate well in the autumn. And
when would you sow them? Autumn time?
Well, it's a bit of a performance sowing it, but you need to go through to get any sort of germination. You need to sow it in October, really.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Is that another question there? I didn't quite catch it. Yeah, I think it's if you can get enough mulch, yeah, whatever it is, pretty much like mushroom compost or green waste or whatever, it would improve it. So you know, don't be afraid of it. Anything that increases the soil life will help the asparagus because it'll help the structure. So worms and that are great. So bring it on. Yeah, don't grow it in the desert. Right, next one, please, Ewan. Population, massive range there, 18,000 to 35,000. I always go with about 22, something like that, 22,000. Generally, it's planted in single rows. If you buy enough crowns off the propagators, they will throw in a planting machine, which puts them in at varying populations. It tends to put them in quite deep, but it is a useful way of getting the crowns in and buried at the same time. It's always the way in horticulture. If you put a higher population in, it will give higher early returns, so you'll get a bigger crop in year 3, but by year 5 it will all have evened up. So it depends on what sort of money you want to spend, and if you plant too many plants, then you'll end up getting loads of thin spears. So you don't really want that. The market seems to be in large and medium spears. At one time, everybody seemed to want packs of the biggest spears that you could possibly grow, sort of thick as your thumb and bigger. But now they seem to want a mixed pack, and in the 250-gram bundle they want some big ones and small ones. So it seems like the trend's changing a bit. So you don't need to grade it in sort of supermarket type grades where everything is exactly the same. You can have 3 or 4 different sizes in your bundle, and the folks can deal with that. So next one, Ewan, please. This is a useful one for reference, really. Just tells you that how far the plants, how many plants you need per meter on these spacings. It looks a bit complicated, but 22,000 is my normal figure for hectare, and if you go a meter between, you need 2.2 plants to the meter. If you go 1.6, you need 3.5 plants to get that density. So that's the general range. Most farms will be on about 1.5 meters between rows, I would guess. And then you need just over 3 plants to the meter when you're laying it out. So keep that table in mind for reference when you're trying to work out how thick to put them in. Well, the next slide, please. Not a slide. I thought I had a slide there of asparagus crown, but asparagus crowns, they are, they're big things. They're like mop heads, really. So they are, if you put them in 3 to the meter, they are more or less touching when you put them in the furrows. So there's not a lot of space between them. These are some recommendations we got from the breeders. Guinlim, or they're spelled about 15 different ways, but it's Gainlim, Guinlim, whatever. That's the Dutch spelling. 3.5 to 4 plants to the meter. Backlim, which is a very tall, thick-grown variety that's probably being outdone now by Portlim. You want 4 or 5 to the meter. All the others down there, Gulf Millennium is probably the most popular one planted now. There's a whole Gulf series of varieties, and they're all pretty good. Mondeo is a very, very dense variety. You get masses and masses and masses of spears on it. Can go quite small, so plant fewer to the meter. And Erasmus is quite an exciting development because it's a really good purple, and that's come from a totally different breeding program. BGO from Holland, and they're selling that through Alstom Seeds. So we've got a really good purple, and purples tend to be quite eye-catching, and they taste sweeter than the green. So quite an interesting one there. And we've always wanted a good purple, but the old ones like Jacques Mar and Pacific Purple were very, very short persistent. So hopefully now we've got one, and I've seen commercial plantations of it where it's reached 2 meters tall and quite impressive. So that's definitely one to make a note of. Next one, please. When you plant on a flat field, so there's no suggestion of a ridge there, and you make a furrow 15 centimeters to 20 centimeters, that's 6 to 8 inches deep. So there's a definite furrow there. That's measured once the top of the crown is in. That's the depth they want to be. So the crown wants to be 15 centimeters deep after planting. And you place the plants out in the furrow, and then get the soil back on top of them as quickly as you can. And then after you've done that, there'll be a flat surface or a slight ridge over where the row is. So don't get rolling it or firming it or anything nasty like that. Just make sure all the roots are buried, and there's about 6 inches of soil on top of the ground. Okay, next one, please. There's the asparagus crown. Well, you can see there it's almost half a metre long. So if you're putting 3 to the metre, there's going to be a fair bit of overlap, and it's an A grade asparagus. That's the sort of thing you'll be getting. Then you can see it's quite a sizable thing, and they're very fragile. So you need a bit of sympathetic handling, because they generally arrive in nets, and you've got to make sure that your people, unless you're doing it yourselves, are trained, and they don't bash the nets about. They don't sort of, they're careful getting them out of the nets, and these are all the key things about planting the asparagus, which is probably the most critical part of the whole process, really. So take a lot of care at planting. Handle them as if they were eggs, and don't break any root off, don't chop any root off, and you're better to overlap them than chop roots off. But farmers being farmers, they tend to do that. But that is what the crowns will be like when you buy them. Okay, next one, please. Right. If the planting goes well and everything is focused on and looked after and done carefully, then weed control is the main factor then. So you don't want your crop going under the first year, and you either do that by using low rates of herbicide, which will get you over the first 3 to 6 weeks, or you start a program of very gradually ridging it up, and that's what we did on the organic system. The idea was that every flush of weed, we put a very, very shallow ridge on it, and then by the end of the season we had quite a big ridge, and then we were able to break that down in the winter, because you can work out how deep the crowns are and then work on top of them, and then you start that process the following year. So first year it's a really weak looking thing, so you only get a couple of spears, so you don't want slugs or rabbits or anything grazing them off, and you just need all that energy to go down and getting a decent root system going. So as always, weeds are always best controlled before they actually come up. So it's hard to control weeds once they are through. Herbicide choice, you're probably best going through an advisor, and Toby can help you with that. We've got plenty of different herbicide options. You need to know the rates for relative to the soil type and the newness of the plant, so you don't go full rate on anything. So you would ignore the EMU rates and go a lot lower. And the cultivations, as I said, very, 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 very successful. Okay, next one, please. Well, that's an example of that is, believe it or not, a first year crop. So if you can get as good as that, then happy days. But it doesn't usually do that well. And that's about October in the first year, and it's been low rates of weed control going on it on really good sandy land, and then it's been successively ridged up after. So that's a really good response, and that's about as good as you see. That was on some sand land on a big farm down in Kidderminster way, and they certainly got the growing of it sussed out down there. And you can see there that the fern is abundant, it's thick, and it's nice green, even coloured. There's not all yellow, nice and blue, and then that's really your aim. But you very rarely see that good first year, very rarely. And they had a sort of compact tractor with like a sort of half a potato ridging body on either side. It wasn't ridged over the top, it was ridged from side to side, so the machine just did that cultivated row plus the forcing of the soil. So it was a mini tractor really, and they did that, I won't say weekly, but they did it every month at least. And it also took out the wheelings after, so it was a very, very tidy looking job. And that's really what gave me the idea for the EIP, that we could do it organically if we just kept ridging the soil up, and it, even on ground that was nowhere near as good as that, it worked out quite well. So remember that slide, and that is your aim for your first or second year. If you get up as good as that, then you'll have 15 years, no problem. Okay, next one, please. Long dormant period, so it disappears or can be mown off in November. They always say don't mow it off as a shade of green in it. I'm not convinced with that myself. I don't think it's putting much into the crown. I think it's more likely to be risky transferring the fungus diseases, which we'll come on to later on. But mid-November you can mow it off and start breaking down that woody fern, because by then it's like quite dignified, and you want to try and break that up and get it buried if you can, so when you come to the following year you've got a totally clean field and none of that debris which was contaminating the emergent spears with diseases. Whatever program you get on, you get resistant weeds building up, so you know, then you have to keep varying the herbicide program to just go along with those resistant weeds really. And then there's one or two weeds that are really difficult, and that's things like the Artemisia family, the mugworts, and one or two others, bindweeds, and they can be quite difficult, but you know, it's often in old plantations, and you need to get on top of those weeds early on really. Yeah, you can go through the various emus on asparagus. I'm not a big fan of the Callisto. I think it's too crop severe. I definitely wouldn't use Callisto in June. So that's another herbicide that's crept through on an emu, but I don't think it's that safe. It's a good herbicide, but it's not safe enough for this crop. Farms put another dose of herbicide on actually the day they stop cutting, so you know, you can go through and spray it over, and if you've got a lot of weed in it, creeping thistle can be a nightmare, and that is a good chance to get a spray on for that. Again, with your choices, you need to come to agronomists like me and get it sorted out. And every time you cultivate, put a new residual on, because you'll disturb the herbicide layer, and then there'll be a load more weed coming up. So not a crop to compete with weed, but because it's dormant for such a long period, once the crop's established, weed is not a major factor. And if you're doing organic, then it's just a case of cultivating, and you need to know how deep the crowns are, and you can cultivate on top of them then without doing any damage. Okay, next one please. Right, you can go on to the HSE website, pesticides, and look at all the emus on asparagus. There's loads of them there, much more than we got on a lot of other crops. And it's just a case of understanding what the problem weeds are, what the actives are, what rates you've got to use, and one or two late germinating things like black nightshade, and that can be a bit of a problem, but there's usually a way around if you mix and match the herbicides. Okay, next one. This is what we're after. Again, that's a first year crop, massive field there, and you know, we just want that dead even crop, nice colour overall, and there'll be a lot of energy going into that. Even though that crop is planted out quite a low density, 22,000 to the hectare, it's only 2.5 to the square metre. You can see there that in the first year we've almost got, well, if we spread that crop flat, it would be total ground cover. So, you know, quite interesting. The whole point of growing that fern is to build up the crowns in the soil, and some of they've got two forms of root. They've got storage roots and feeding roots, and the storage roots can last 3 to 5 years. So, you know, you need to A, build those up, and B, look after them. Okay, next one. I wouldn't be a talk without pests and diseases. Asparagus beetle, apparently it's already active. We've got no insecticides we can actually use in crop now, so that's been a bit of a snag for us. But all the beetle control will now have to be done post-harvest. So, you know, on the emerging crop after 21st of June, really, or whenever you do stop. If the plantation goes weak, you can stop early, but it doesn't always help it regenerate that much. So you sometimes get 3 or 4 years when you don't get beetle, and then suddenly it comes in from somewhere and starts building up. So what you basically get is rows of eggs on the spears, and little maggots that feed on the fern when it's mature, but it's, you know, it's the eggs on the spears that puts people off, really. Okay, next one. Stemphillium, there'll be a bit about now, which is, it's a sort of purple lesion on the spears. As I said before, these diseases are winter on the debris of the old crop, some recent AHDB work, which we did. My colleague Angela Buckle did it, and she found that spraying urea on the just the ordinary nitrogen, 44% nitrogen urea on the crop as a spray, helped the debris rot down and drastically reduce the amount of stem psyllium in the year after. So yeah, that was quite a useful bit of work, and it's almost cultural control. So look after it, get rid of that debris, and you'll still see a bit of stem psyllium in a wet harvesting season, but getting rid of the winter debris is the key to it, really. Okay, next one, please. Phytophthora is a disease. You can see there, that's some really sad ground, and it's a sort of root rot type thing, and the crowns rot away. So this is the reason that you've got to be on decent land. It causes the spears to kink and go yellow and shrivel, and it's mainly to do with starting on the wrong ground or compacting the ground with excessive traffic. So just attend to looking after that soil structure, and as we just mentioned, addition of organic matter, cover crops and all that, it all helps in that picture. Okay, next one, please. Right, it's the end of my bit, so now it's down to if there's any more questions, I'm happy to go, or we'll go on with Adrian and Phil. Right, Adrian, you're on.
Thanks for the questions for the chat. So yeah, if we just, Adrian, just if we'll pass over to you, if Ewan can stop sharing, then brilliant. Thanks.
Right, am I on? Everyone
Yeah.
hear me? Yeah. Apologies, I don't do many of these, so I sorry if I ramble on or just stare blankly at the screen. My name's Eddie Marks. We're from a company called Bellis Brothers. So we're a family-run business up in out in the outskirts of Wrexham. So we're right on the border between sort of Wrexham and Chester. We are a garden centre, farm shop and garden centre, and then a working farm. So we've sort of diversified over the years to different bits and pieces. We're a sort of 330 acre farm. We rent most of it now. We probably only farm ourselves sort of about 50 acres. And that's predominantly, we do potatoes, onions, carrots, soft fruits. So it's a little bit of everything. I've had a different career before this, so I've been thrust into this. So I'm no expert by any stretch of the imagination. I'm the light entertainment between Chris and Phil, the real experts. So I will be as quick as I can and give you sort of my experience of growing. So we've got sort of just under a hectare of asparagus. We have got 32 rows that we split into A side and B side. We found that by doing this, we can try and get something every day rather than picking the same crop every single time. The crop currently we've got in, we planted about 4 years ago, April 17. So we've had a couple of years off this one currently. Previously, we had about 12 years off a similar sort of size field before. We use the variety of Ginlum, however it is to be pronounced, which is a hybrid variety. We chose that one as it's supposed to be sort of a heavy cropping one, good for sort of commercial use. So planting wise, it was a 3-man job. We sort of cannibalized a strawberry planter, sort of bit of plyboard on the back, because we realized after the first time of planting, it is a back-breaking job. Be prepared for that. So we attached a bit of plywood, cut some holes out, and we sort of lay on it a bit like Superman getting pulled behind a tractor. So it ruined your shoulders rather than your back. But it did seem to sort of speed the process up. So we had one man driving, one man Superman in it, and then another just helping to cover over if the machine hadn't done its job properly. We planted the 1-year-old crowns rather than seeds, as Chris alluded to it, a little bit longer with seeds. We went for 1-year crowns. I think you can buy 2-year crowns as well, but they don't transplant as well apparently. So we've always gone with the 1-year crown. Field location wise, it is really, really important. I know I won't go over what Chris has said, but the mistakes we've made. We've got a field that's got a lot of thistle in it. It is south-facing, it is lighter soil, but it suffers from that. What resonated through Chris's presentation was getting the planting right, and I can't agree with that enough. Even down to, we've got a tree that casts a shadow over part of the field, and it's amazing the difference between the asparagus that gets the sun all the time and a little bit under the tree. Little things like that do make a big difference on it. Obviously with thistle, we are sort of playing a bit of brinkmanship in regards to some spraying. We're not organic. We try to use as little as we can, but we do use pesticide, so herbicide and things. As far as ground prep went, we chisel ploughed, parahowed and rotivated, so the combination of the three, all obviously back of tractors. Pest-wise, we got smashed with aphids last year. We've had a small showing of it this year, but the heavy rain of last weekend has sent them elsewhere, and they haven't come back, touch wood. We have been recommended a product called Flipper, which is fatty acids. I think Chris recommended it to us. That has a 0 harvest interval, so that's something that we may use if the aphids come back. We've obviously seen last year we had some asparagus beetle, but it hasn't reared its head as of yet this year. From a harvesting perspective, we tend to use, we've got a small team on the farm, and we don't get in casual labour, just because we open the farm shop at 9, we try to get it cut and up to the shop at 9. It's difficult to get hold of somebody that wants to come in ad hoc, depending on the weather, at 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock. So it's just a team effort of the sort of permanent farm staff. Takes 1 or 2 hours, again, depending on the weather. Again, it's a back-breaking job. We go through with a knife cutting about 1 centimetre below. And we just use, I'm not sure how we acquired them, a load of Sainsbury's shopping baskets to go through and throw them in there. We then pack them into old plastic mushroom boxes, crates, sorry, about 3K each. It is, again, a bit of a back-breaking job. It is a job every single day. So if you are a small, family unit like we are, you've lost those weekends for that period, because it is, every day. You're not going off anywhere, unfortunately, because once it starts growing and you're not cutting it, you've lost it. We do go on and do a bit of spraying beforehand and afterwards. Like I said, we suffer with the thistles, so we go through. We have knapsack previously, but trying to pull them out. Compaction is a big issue with asparagus, so we try not to take vehicles over it, or try to reduce our travel over the land as much as we can, because they don't like the compaction of it. From a selling perspective, we've just really pushed the sort of gate to shop 0 miles and everything else, which I'm sure obviously is a theme that everybody sort of the one benefit we've got as Welsh growers. It is a good cash crop for us, because we do sort of little quantities of lots of things. It was a good sort of gap filler for whilst we're not selling anything else. So at the moment, we're only doing sort of rhubarb and asparagus. It is very popular, extremely popular. We get it to the shop for 9, and if there's any left by 11, that's pretty unusual. We have people pre-booking it, put it to one side, queuing up for it. It is pretty incredible how popular it is. We use social media obviously to promote ourselves as everybody else does these days. We found that it was a good sort of rather than just obviously strawberries is sort of the big deal for us, sort of June, July. We found asparagus was a good sort of a way to get into people's homes with rather than just like we're opening strawberry soon. It was we've got this asparagus, come and get it, and we felt that it generated a bit of a buzz around social media in the shop. So it was definitely positive from that perspective. We don't tend to wholesale any. We do sell out sort of as quick as we can pick it, to be fair. We aren't getting a huge amount at the moment. As Chris alluded to with the weather, we're probably getting 15, 20 kilos at best at the moment. From a monetary perspective, we don't charge anything near what Chris recommends charging. We're currently charging $7.49 a kilo, which Chris will say is too cheap. But we found people's eyebrows raise even at $7.49 a kilo. So we price it at $3.75 for 500 grams, which people seem to be a little bit more wanting of. We don't band it. We don't stick or anything on it. We don't, wash it, prep it or anything. We literally take it from the shopping baskets that we cut it in straight into sort of presentation boxes in the shop. We put it at a prime position. We've put a little bit of POS, point of sale, all around explaining asparagus. We get a lot of disappointed people coming in at sort of 4 o'clock in the afternoon, not having any. So putting a little bit about how it is very weather dependent, etc., helps sort of manage expectation and gives the customer a little bit of understanding around it. We're running at about 7,000 pounds worth of sales the last couple of years in the period that we were able to harvest it in those couple of weeks. The reason why we haven't really gone for packaging is we found when we did rubber band things up, people just took them off and picked their own bits and then rubber banded them back up again. We're fortunate if there is any left, we've got a cafe on site, so we ship it up to there. They freeze it as well. I have heard of farm shops freezing it and selling it. We've never tried it. Whether that's something to be explored or not, I'm not sure. As Chris said, it's fresh. It's got to go out on the day. Anybody can tell fresh asparagus to day-old asparagus, even if it's been kept in a cooler. So it is a sort of grab it while you can get it sort of product. What else have I got? I suppose from end of season, as Chris said, Chris more or less stole everything I prepared. We go in with a spray afterwards because we've got such a bad field at the moment, and then obviously we leave it to it. It's a great crop from the perspective that if you are busy, it isn't all year attention and needing from you. It can be forgotten about after, to a certain degree, after it's been harvested, and then it pops back up on the radar sort of March time. That suits us great because there's everything else going on with strawberries, pumpkins, and and everything else, which all you guys have got things going on. So yeah, it works well for us. It generates a huge amount of interest on social media. It does bring people to the shop, which maybe won't necessarily come. So I can't recommend it enough. It's just the picking of it is a bit backbreaking. Any difficult questions?
Somebody asked about the insecticide. It was Flipper we used, wasn't it, Adrian?
Yeah, Flipper. So it's a fatty acid. So it's pretty harmless, 0 harvest interval. So it works perfectly for the asparagus, and that was for aphid control that we use that for.
Yeah, well, Flipper's quite interesting that it demands good coverage, but obviously in asparagus, in the harvest period, it's very, very easy to get good coverage because it's basically there's only a spear every metre. Yeah, slugs are a problem, and slugs will cause kink spears. You can get organic slug pellets now, like slugs, ferric phosphate ones, and there's no danger to nature. They are registered on the organic scheme, so there's no reason to have slugs, but tend to be with the asparagus there's little and often. If you can coincide the application of slug pellets at the correct rate on a warm, wet evening, you'll kill a lot more than if you go when it's dry and cold. So Yes, slugs are a bad problem, and it's all to do with managing the trash in the crop and timely use of pellets at the right density. And you know, we know we've got these organic pellets, we don't struggle too much on it. Sorry, was another question, was there? Let's have a
Yeah, is
look.
it flipper or flipper? How do you spell flipper?
As in the
Flipper,
dolphin.
as in the tame dolphin one, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're too young to remember that. Flipper, double PER.
I thought he was joking with me when he recommended it. Or we'd had a drink, but yeah, no, it is flipper.
Yeah.
And there's a question, Adrian. Did you start on a grass field?
We didn't. It was a rented bit of land that we followed cereal crops, so we were kind of hoping that all the thistles will have gone, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, not. But no, it wasn't. It was following cereal rather than grass.
And is flipper organic, Chris?
I don't think it's even a pesticide, so I, you know, just check it on your organic on your scheme. But it's not even a pesticide, I don't think. But it's in the green book, so you know it's covered in there.
Okay, I'm aware of the time. I'm gonna
yeah, we've got to get young Phil on.
Get young Phil on, and I'm also aware that there's, you know, other growers on here who have lots of experience, such as Gareth and Michael.
Yeah, Mr. Hooton.
So you know, there's room for another session, I think. But for now, I'm just gonna share your screen, Phil. And how's that? Okay.
Okay, I think quite a few people will know about Mostyn Kitchen Garden. We, on the scale of some of the other people here, we're tiny. We're really growing on a very, very small scale. And I'm aware that there are a lot of very small scale growers in Wales who may just want to add something that perhaps brings in something that's in the hundreds of pounds rather than the tens of thousands of pounds of turnover. And whilst not in any way wanting to contradict anything that's previously been said, you can be very overfaced by huge amounts of statistics, the looking at perhaps bringing an agronomist in to look at your few hundred square meters of asparagus, not practical, not viable for some of the very small scale growers. We don't generally grow, so we used to do a veg bag scheme. We don't do that anymore now, but we've carried on with the asparagus because we had a tiny area, and like Adrian says, everybody wants it. So we were being asked by anybody that was coming into the estate or anybody that we're having contact with. So apart from eating it for ourselves and family and friends, we thought we would increase the area. We have got we've got a very limited budget on it, obviously, because of the scale that we're growing on. Sorry, can you give me the next slide, Debbie? Next slide. Right. So go back one. That's it. Back on. Lovely. Right. So we started about 4 years ago, and we've seed grown. Now I know Chris has said that the difference in price is insignificant. If you're buying your crowns by the thousand rather than tens of thousands, then the price isn't insignificant. If you were to look, I've looked today on two websites. One was Moles, and the other was RW Walpole. Now, seed is 23p a seed. Crowns are 73p a seed. Now, if you're a very small grower, the difference between spending an extra £500 per 1,000 crowns might put you off this crop completely. So we have actually done a bit of both. We grew the original crop, which was the Jinlin, from seed, and then with us now increasing the production this year, again it is small scale. We've put in some seed grown that we grew last year. We've also bought some crowns, the port limb, from Walpole, and we're also growing some seed, Mondeo, and that's not Ariane, it's Ariana, in the glass house. What we've done with the seed grown is that we've actually grown it on, started it in modules, and then we've grown it on in the same season in 10-inch pots. I'm sure for the likes of people that are putting in a hectare, but this is irrelevant. But if you want to put in a small scale crop, this might be something that you're prepared to do the labour rather than actually spend the money buying in the crowns. So can you go on to the next one, please? Right, so this is one of our beds with inside the wall garden. These are the crowns that we bought in from Walpole. I think they're probably B. I don't think they were A crowns, but they actually were. They were quite impressive. They looked very, very good when they came. And the next one, please, Debbie. Right, so these are our pot grown from the previous year. They have obviously got a tremendous plant in a pot at that size, which we're not disturbing because we're still planting at the same depth. And they're going in undisturbed with a chance to get away. Again, with talking about soil, we wanted to grow a small crop of asparagus. We do not have ideal soil conditions here. We've got a Victorian wall garden with not much more than about a foot of topsoil because somebody had to strip it off with a bulldozer to renovate the wall garden. It's not an ideal growing condition, but we still get a harvestable crop. We don't use a cocktail of pesticides because it wouldn't realistically be worth me buying in quantities to use. We are not able on this scale to put machinery over it particularly, so it's hand work. I'm just trying to make the point that it is actually possible to grow a small scale crop that may add a reasonable percentage to the turnover of a small grower. Is there another slide after that, Debbie? So looking at seed, this is ones that we've actually grown on for this season, and we'll pot these on. We're fortunate that we do have the propagation areas on quite a large scale. We just don't have the ground outside to grow the crop on a large scale. So whilst we've got that facility, it is really, really useful. I know that there are organic growers on tonight. Because we're doing it on a small scale, we're able to use manual labour. Weed control without machines. So we've got sort of a little bit of an advantage that we aren't using pesticides whilst we're not certified organically. Without going back over all the bits and pieces that Chris has been talking about, I'm just very aware that there are much smaller growers than many of the big farms that are putting this in, whilst you've got those all over Wales. And in the past, the encouragement in Wales has always been about getting more and more small growers who are not intending to put in a hectare. I think that's probably about the limit of our experience with it here. All I can tell you is there are people queuing up to buy the limited amount that we have.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay.
There's a question came through from John and I answered it. I hope you don't mind. It said, were these previously no dig beds? And I said, no. There weren't no dig beds previously, were they? As you were saying, they were bulldozed and
yeah. I'm just making the point that we are not growing on ideal conditions, and we're not growing on a mechanical scale, but it's still possible to grow a very viable product that will fly out the door.
Hi Tom, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, but you were talking about machinery. I use a BCS walk behind tractor, and I was wondering if you could set your rows out for that kind of thing. I haven't got this attachment for it, but they have some device. It's a bit like a rotavator, or a plough, and it does create a bit of a furrow. I wonder if you could be shoving the soil.
Yeah, we could. We've got a Kubota, one of the big old 70s. Yeah, you can use and there's a ridging blade behind that.
Yeah.
We actually rotate the beds using an old Massey Ferguson 135. So we have got some machinery, but we're not going back into ridge afterwards with the machinery.
Okay.
We can easily run a small rotavator down to loosen that soil and then re-ridge.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make the point that this is pedestrian machinery as opposed
Sure.
to great big tractors. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Did anyone else want to ask any questions? I'm aware, as I say, that we are over time actually, but it's been interesting because I think we can, you know, we've had kind of the technical advice and Chris, and then we've had Adrian on quite a big scale, Mostyn Kitchen Garden, Phil on a really small scale. And as I say, I'm aware that there's other growers like Gareth, who I think you pick by hand, Gareth, yourself. Is that right? Yeah. And obviously, Michael, you grow asparagus, and Nick, you're an expert too. So there's lots of kind of expertise on this call that maybe we can look at taking forward and sharing as a group. I think I don't know how people feel about that. There is a question come from Tom. Thanks for that. Which is, are there any examples of no dig cultivation of asparagus? That's one for you, Chris, maybe.
Well, like I say, the Monmouth one depended on moving soil and re-ridging. So, you know, it's interesting to hear Phil and his system. But I think, you know, on a small scale, then it's easy to use no dig and just control the weeds with mulch. I couldn't see any problem with that at all. It's just on a big scale, you know, it's difficult to get the quantity of mulch. The good thing about it, hearing the two growers commenting, is that the demand is really strong, and it can define a farm sharp. So that's what always gets me about asparagus. Adrian pointed out, it comes in the hungry gap when there's, you know, there's, like you said, there's only asparagus and rhubarb now because it's a late spring, and it does really give a good entry into the season for the, you know, and as Adrian said, it's really good on social media. As Phil says, it doesn't have to be done big scale. So, you know, whatever you grow will be wanted. I mean, I grow a fair bit at home, and you know, I've never got as many friends as I've got when I'm cutting asparagus.
And for those people that aren't growing, but or maybe are and need additional outlets or are not sure how to market theirs, Tyfu Cymru do offer the one-to-one support for social media or digital marketing. So it's quite useful if you wanted to explore how you promoted your product out to your customers locally. So you can always get in touch with us if that's something that would be useful. There are a couple of events coming up, just to let you know. One of them is the integrated pest disease management stuff, which is limiting the impact of early summer pests. That's on the 12th. On the 17th, how to master financial spreadsheets on Excel. Exciting stuff. So I can see you all signing up to that along with me. But do go on to the What's On part of the Tyfu Cymru website, and you can see all of the up and coming sessions that are already booked in, but obviously we'll be looking at others if there's enough interest. I think there was something that said, but yeah, if you could fill out the survey, that would be really helpful. Excuse, my voice is going very strange. Because it means that it informs future sessions for us as well, and whether we're getting them right. And also, if you are interested in being part of an asparagus group, then can you let us know, email and let us know, and then we've got your permission to include you on the WhatsApp group if that's something you're interested in. So I'm going to say good night to everybody. We've overrun a little bit, but thanks very much indeed.
Debbie?
Yeah.
Could I just have a word? On a previous Zoom meeting, Philip talked about a spreadsheet for cropping, which I think we're coming forward, but we haven't seen it yet.
Philip, share.
Yeah, it is available, and it does take a bit of explaining, but it's a very, very useful tool. And
you said so, and you proffered it to the group, but nothing's happened since.
I think that was with the Agroscope group. So I'm waiting for somebody to sort of say, right, we'll do it. But we'll sort something out.
You made it sound interesting.
Charge him for it, Phil.
maybe that's something we can build into future sessions for the Veg Network, actually. Crop, that crop planning, certainly crop rotation comes up as something that people are interested in. So maybe that planning comes into that as well. But I know where you live, Michael. I've got your email address as well, so we'll
It's a threat.
send it to you. So I'm going to say noswaith dda and thank you. Diolch yn fawr to everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening, and keep in touch, and we'll hopefully carry on putting sessions on that are of interest to you.